Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Martin Johnson. He used to work at Empire Flippers and now provides strategic boutique advisory services to people looking to sell their e-commerce businesses. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about buying and selling online businesses, a topic that I find fascinating. We're also going to talk a lot about just living in Latin America in general. Martin's good friends with the OG Vance, with Freddie Lansky, with Jake Nomada, and a bunch of the other LATAM guys. So it's always great to talk to someone else, another one of the mutuals. So Martin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Um, I've spent most of the year here, and I just got back about a month and a half ago.
That's awesome. How you liking it?
Buenos Aires is good, man. It's quite a polarizing place, I suppose. That's a good way to kind of describe it. But it's a very unique place in South America.
I know there was a squad of some of the guys that Jake's friends with that were down there. Did you meet up with any of those guys?
Yeah. I was definitely a part of that squad. So a lot of guys that Jake was hanging out with when he was in Panama. Kind of a lot of those guys I was already friends with, and they came here kind of to hang out with me, hang out with a couple of our other buddies. So that was fun times.
It's definitely a growing digital nomad hub, Buenos Aires.
Yeah, it is. I came here actually in 2019 for the first time. Spent a couple months here, and I remember walking around Palermo and never really hearing English or seeing foreigners. And since being back, I definitely have noticed things picking up. Maybe that's just me being more attuned to like noticing those kinds of things, but I definitely have noticed. I think Europeans in particular have always come here, but I think Americans have just started coming here, kind of like the last year and a half.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, well, it's definitely been getting cheaper and cheaper every year from what I hear.
Yeah, definitely. I actually came here. I was living in Mexico, and I came here in 2019 when the peso kind of took a, a fall, pretty deep fall. So I kind of, it was part of the motive. I mean, I wanted to come check it out anyways, but it was part of the motivation. I was like, wow, it must be pretty cheap there. So I decided to come here, and I liked it. And then it's definitely, if you're earning in a foreign currency, it's definitely a cheap place. If you're not, unfortunately, earning in a foreign currency, I don't know. It's not that cheap of a place, actually.
For sure. And I think we'll come back to like a bigger discussion around Latin American cities and bases and where you've been based up. But I thought you could give us a little bit of like an intro to, just tell us about yourself for the audience out there and how you got started.
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, I got my start actually working with a company called Empire Flippers, and that's kind of a company that it's a brokerage in the online space, and they focus a lot on helping people buy and sell online internet-based businesses. So, content websites, SaaS businesses, um, e-commerce, Amazon FBA type of businesses is really kind of their bread and butter. And I started working with them. It would have been back in about 2018. So this is back before there was I don't know how familiar you are with this, but back before there was like a flood of capital into the space. So they were relatively boutique, pretty small, selling some content sites here and there for, maybe a couple 100,000 would be like a bigger sale. And then I really kind of saw the evolution of the industry right around late 2019, early 2020, when a bunch of, we call them aggregators, or I guess private equity firms, raised a bunch of capital to start acquiring e-commerce and specifically Amazon FBA brands. So the whole M&A space, as far as online business, has really taken off. And I guess what I was doing when I was working back at Empire Flippers was more buy side stuff. So helping a lot of buyers, you know, identify, source, and kind of acquire online businesses. And
Hmm.
since then, I've really moved more towards the sell side. So providing more strategic and financial and operational advisory to e-commerce businesses, obviously with an exit always in mind. So I help them sort of act as like a fractional CFO, and then also help them through the actual exit and sale as well. So that's kind of, I'd say, like 80 to 90% of what I'm up to right now, and the other kind of 10 to 15 is still helping that buy side. And I think it's a cool service, the buy side, just because it's something that I would also like to continue doing is acquiring e-commerce businesses and brands and building my own portfolio. So I kind of get to, evaluate deals and see the process and learn myself as I'm helping my clients. So that's always fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually looked at jobs at Empire Flippers a couple times. I always thought it'd be funny to work for them and kind of get the inside scoop on what's happening in the online business buying sector, because they're really one of the biggest, if not the biggest player. I forget the names now of the other couple ones. One's called like Lighthouse or Greenhouse, and there's a few of them, right?
Yeah, Quiet Light, I think you're referencing.
Quiet Light.
There's like FE International. They're
Yep.
kind of the bigger ones. They're a bit more like corporate type of, like more like, actually in an office in New York City or London type of investment banking firm. And then there's some others. There's like Flippa. Micro Acquire is a relatively newer player, and I think they're focusing more
Hmm.
on like SaaS and startups. So there's
Hmm.
like some hybrid marketplaces. There's some more like true brokerage firms. And your point about learning the industry, I mean, that's really why I started working for them. I think one thing you get when you do go work for a company in a job is like you get this network. So I wanted to have a huge network when I first started kind of like working online and in the space. And I just thought it was the best path, the best shortcut for a, you know, young 23-year-old out of college that doesn't know anything or anyone to kind of get that shortcut and eye into the space. And yeah, I think it was definitely a benefit for me.
Yeah, I guess for any of the listeners unfamiliar with Empire Flippers, it is like an extremely important business in the industry, not only in buying online businesses, but I think actually in the digital nomad, remote work industry as well, and sort of the history of digital nomadism, because Empire Flippers has been around a long time. You can tell me the exact year, but let's call it 10 years. And they've had a podcast for a long time where they talked about buying online businesses. They talked about kind of what it was like living in the Philippines and Saigon and things like that. Justin Cook and those guys. And so they've always been a pretty influential group.
Yeah, I would agree. They were kind of pioneers along with the obviously the Dynamite Circle guys, the Tropical MBA guys. They kind of ran in the same circle, and I think you're right. They were like pretty influential with their podcasts, and um, yeah, they've made a lot of like good content just about the industry as a whole.
Yeah, so I did interview Dan Andrews, the founder of Tropical MBA and Dynamite Circle. Did you listen to that one?
I listened to part of it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and so it was very cool because I think with Empire Flippers, a lot of the early listings that they had on their site, a lot of the early businesses that they had for sale were probably sourced from people in the Dynamite Circle. So I think there was a lot of crossover like that.
Yep, a lot of like early buyers as well.
Hmm.
I think that's definitely kind of how they got their start. Um, with the company as a whole was kind of like, yeah, like the really like SEO world and the whole like digital nomad scene. And I think now it's just a bigger industry now. And I think the bootstrap entrepreneur, maybe they're selling some companies, but maybe not doing as much of like the acquiring.
Yeah, so it kind of begs the question, like, what have you seen and how the industry has evolved over the past couple of years? You talked a little bit about aggregators and a bit about kind of the inevitable institutionalization of this asset class.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, kind of around that 2009, that late 2019, early 2020, and like really 2020 and 2021, there just really was a huge influx of capital. There was a company called Thras.io. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
They were one of the first kind of Amazon aggregators or private equity companies that their whole thesis was essentially to buy, acquire, and like roll up Amazon FBA brands. So they raised, I mean, we're talking multi millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire with the sole purpose of acquiring FBA brands. So um, they had, I think they achieved like the fastest, I don't remember the exact number, but they achieved like one of the fastest and highest like valuations in a year's time frame or something. And that caught a headline. And there was kind of all of a sudden all of these other companies that were trying to essentially emulate the Thras.io model, which was to raise capital, acquire Amazon FBA brands. And I think now there's probably 100 or so of these companies that have kind of sprung up in the last, we'll call it 2 years. And obviously, with that much money and that much demand, as a result, I mean, not only have assets across the board kind of they obviously went up in 2020, 2021. The online business industry was no different. And I think it was just a perfect storm of you had all of the economic stimulus going on, and then you had all of these buyers coming into this space, and asset prices were kind of going up. And it was really, really a sweet time if you were a Amazon FBA seller or really online business seller as a whole. And kind of that 2020 to, we'll call it, earlier this year, 2022 is
Mhm.
kind of when things started, I'd say, cooling off a little bit. Um, and that's kind of how just like the sheer magnitude and amount of money that I've seen come into the space. I think it's a really unique asset class, and I think that's why it attracts a lot of people. And I definitely only see the online M&A world kind of continuing to evolve over the next decade or so.
Yeah, because I think we've seen institutional money come down in a couple different ways. So you would see bigger, like at the highest echelons, you would see companies like Tiger Global and the really big PE firms start having to dip down into Series A and even seed deals, and talking venture capital, and going into lower. What would you call it, like lower market cap private equity deals as well, going into like, 5-10 million dollar deals. And that was something new because previously the private equity firms wouldn't touch the small stuff. And the small stuff, there was almost like a Chinese wall where there was all this like micro entrepreneurship happening, and then there was all this like institutional entrepreneurship happening. And if you, and entrepreneurs had to sort of cross a barrier in terms of revenue multiples and whatnot. Otherwise, institutions weren't going to look at it because it just wasn't worth their time. It wasn't going to move the needle when you have a big fund, and you need to return a multiple on, say, like $100 million fund. But we've seen them come down market, and I think we've seen pretty much everyone come down market, including these aggregators and stuff. And I think we've also seen some professionalization in terms of like the outsourced management stuff, which is kind of a topic in and of itself. But a couple, definitely, as you mentioned, like a perfect storm of a couple different factors.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you're right. Like kind of that $5 million valuation mark has for a long time, maybe 5 to 10 million, has kind of been like that, kind of too small for the larger PE firms to touch. Because when you think about it, like the deal costs, the difference in deal costs, lawyer fees and the M&A team and everything isn't different between we'll call it a $1 million valuation and a $10 million valuation. It's not really that drastic of a change, but obviously you're getting lower earnings, lower valuation company, um, and then operating as well isn't necessarily that different. So you're completely right. Like it's just the better ROI on their time and ultimately capital as well to go after those bigger deals. And as a result, I mean, most like earning size is a huge factor into multiple. So generally higher earnings companies are going to get higher multiples just due to
Mhm.
sheer supply and demand. And that applies as well in the online industry, the online business space as well. Like if you're a top 100 Amazon FBA seller or e-commerce business, like there's so few of you and you're so in demand that you're going to just by sheer supply and demand going to command a higher multiple as opposed to someone that's, you know, doing a couple tens of thousands of dollars a month in revenue or something like that. And there's, you know, thousands of you.
Mhm. Definitely. And then I guess this was kind of after your time at Empire Flippers, but I'm sure you saw everything about the EF Capital and about sort of like buying businesses and then sort of implanting new management that sort of really understands the business model, be it AdSense or FBA, and sort of bringing in professional management to these entrepreneur-led bootstrap companies.
Yeah, that was after my time. I know that they do have that EF Capital program, and I kind of know like the general overview of how it works. I think it's a really cool uh, model. I think it's like something that a lot of people have been. I think a lot of people asked for that for like the longest time. They were like, "Hey, like I want to invest in this, but you know, I want nothing to do with running it. Like, can I just give you $100,000 and you know?" I see these returns of, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60% annualized. Like, can I get involved with that even though I have no experience? I just have the cash and I want to do it. How can I do it? So yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's kind of what the EF Capital program was meant to solve was let's get some guys that have a track record of operating, raise some outside funding, and you know we'll make it a win-win for everybody involved. And I think that's kind of why EF Capital was involved. I think we'll see potentially more of that in the future. I think it's a really good idea and a good way to like get more people involved in the space because definitely there's a learning curve to operating an online business. And I think, you know, for someone who's maybe in their 50s, 60s, they don't necessarily want to take on the project of like learning those skills. It might make sense for them just to be like, hey, you know, here's $250,000. What can you do for me? And a good way to diversify into like a relatively uncorrelated asset class as opposed to like, you know, stocks, real estate, etc.
Hmm. And then, of course, a lot of the relevance for us is the fact that these are businesses that are location independent businesses. They can be run from anywhere in the world, and they're often started by people from everywhere in the world. What was like kind of the makeup of, I guess, on the buy side and sell side in terms of like how international it is, where people were from?
Yeah, so I'll start with the buy side, and I'd say most of the buy side is coming out of North America. At least, you know, there's some like funds in Europe, but I think a lot of American, kind of like North American type of funds as well. And then I think you have everywhere. I mean, literally everyone. Like you have people that are looking to spend 20K on their first content site, and people that you know maybe want to potentially like move abroad or buy their way out of a job or something like that, and they see this as a good opportunity because you know you let's say you put up $100,000 and you have something that's cash flowing, you know, a couple $3,000-4,000 a month, you know, that's going to be enough to get you by in a place like Latin America or Southeast Asia or something like that. So I think that's kind of like one bucket. And then you also have a couple people that are maybe trying to build a portfolio a bit more serious, um, all the way up to, like I said, like institutional money, like, you know, very serious operation with an office in New York City and, you know, raising a bunch of capital and teams of hundreds of people. So very, very diverse, I'd say, on the buy side. And then the sell side is usually just your, you know, your scrappy entrepreneur, I would say. Like that's kind of a lot of people that are selling these online businesses. Um, I think a lot, pretty international, I'd say. Surprisingly, like a lot of good, smart operators in Eastern Europe, I've found. Not so
Hmm.
much Latin America. Obviously, you've got some like North American, Aussie type of stuff, but I'd say most of the operators are going to be like North American, some Europe, and possibly some Aussie and a little bit of Asia coverage.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time scrolling the listings on Empire Flippers because how it would work is they would release all the new listings every Monday morning. So every week there'd be like a flood of new businesses that you could take a look at. You could it was almost like it was almost like the Airbnb interface where you can sort of filter by price, by multiple, and it's almost like you could just buy it online straight off the website. And I think the starting price was like, I think that the you had to make at least like $1,000 a month net profit
Yep.
to get listed. So $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month, and then that would have like a 36 40x multiple on monthly income. So that business would be worth around, like 35 to 40 grand, and that was kind of like the baseline. And there was businesses with everything from like 40 grand all the way up to a couple $1 million.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think those, like any of the businesses under 100K, seem to get snapped up pretty fast.
Yeah, they definitely do. It's just competitive because there's a lot of demand and like want at those price points. And I think a platform. So like, there's obviously various ways to make acquisitions. Like you have major brokers like the ones that we talked about. Then there's other types of marketplaces like a Flippa or various like Facebook groups. There's private communities. There's a ton of like as far as like getting deal flow, there's a ton of different avenues. There's off market deals, emails, like there's tons of different avenues. I think probably Empire Flippers in particular has like some of the best marketing and one of the like major household names. So as a result, they just have a lot of demand, especially down there. So I think that's why they move, sometimes as quickly as like an hour of being listed on Monday morning.
That's crazy.
Yep.
And have you seen sort of the popularity of different business models change over time where, the biggest business models, I guess, are FBA, AdSense, um, Kindle,
Yep.
what else? SaaS, a couple others. What have you seen in terms of the change?
Yeah, I think like I've been saying, like the last 2 years has just been so much money coming in to acquire e-commerce and Amazon FBA businesses. But I think before that, I think content was actually like really popular. So content website is, generally going to be something that's ranking in Google based on some keywords, some like sort of buyer intent keywords, and then directing you either to like an affiliate page or um, excuse me, they're taking an affiliate commission. So they're directing you to a third party website and then you make a purchase and then they get a kickback on that purchase. So that'd be like an example of an affiliate. Also, you have advertising revenue. So that's going to be like, your AdSense or a Zoic or AdThrive or a variety of different kind of advertising networks that you can monetize with. Um,
Hmm.
and I think the Amazon affiliate world was super popular, but then kind of over the last years, they've just steadily decreased their affiliate fees, which is now almost like not practical to like with the amount of money that you have to spend for the content and backlinks. It's almost not
Hmm.
practical to like just take the small commissions that Amazon is offering. So that kind of died out. Um, then you also have, you mentioned KDP. So that's like, actually like publishing on Amazon books. You have drop shipping that was popular kind of back in like the mid 2010 to 15 range, like 15, 16 range. Um, I think SaaS is definitely gaining popularity. And I also think, I think just like we could potentially see more sales of like agencies, like digital agencies, remote agencies, and things like that. I know that they're not like the sexiest acquisitions, but I could see more of that as well in the
Hmm.
future. But I think SaaS is kind of popular. I think, content might be making a comeback as well.
Yeah, for sure. Um, And one of the things we were talking about before we got started on the call was kind of the how to move abroad. Like, what is the best, quickest, fastest, safest path to moving abroad? So, if you're someone listening to this and you're still, working your office job, working as a dentist or whatever it is, how do you start getting remote online income, location independent income? In your opinion, Martin, like what are some of the easiest ways to start making online income?
Yeah, so like I was telling you, I mean, I really think that the two quickest and really like best options, I think number one is probably the more obvious option and makes sense for a lot of people, and that's just to get a remote job. And I think that, that's definitely something that is more doable in 2022 and beyond than it was when I was looking to move abroad and willing to do whatever it takes back, 4 or 5 years ago. There wasn't a lot of companies that were willing to just let you work from wherever and kind of like do whatever you wanted and live kind of like the digital nomad quote life. So I
Mhm.
think that was like an option that wasn't necessarily so viable. So as a result, most people on the internet and on Twitter and kind of on podcasts in like the digital nomad sphere were mostly talking about freelancing and starting a business. And I think that starting a business, yeah, that's a great way to like move up and really elevate your life and level up in life. But I think if you're someone just starting out like I was, I mean, I was a 23-year-old kid. I didn't really know much about the world. So I think for me, getting a job made a lot of sense. And like I was saying earlier, it allowed me to have a network right away of people that have been doing it, of people that, and again, keep in mind, a lot has changed over the last 5 years. Like there's way more people that are doing it now and way more of like networking opportunities available, which is crazy. Like to think back that like guys like you and I are like more seasoned in, in this type of lifestyle. But it's like, I think that getting a job option is a really big one. And then I think also kind of the theme of what I do, right, is I think buying an online business, I think it's often, maybe if you have a little bit more money and you don't want to get a job, I think buying an online business is an excellent option because, you can have some cash flow right off the bat, have something to work on. It would allow you to relocate to like especially if you have like a little bit of a run rate too, you could just use the money that online
Mhm.
business is already generating, invest it back into the business. You're going to have more time. You'll be able to take advantage of lower cost living, and you can kind of just bootstrap in whatever location that you do choose. So I think those two options are vastly underrated. And I think a lot of people on the internet talk about building a business, they talk about entrepreneurship, they talk about freelancing. But I think those two options are great ones.
Yeah, I think it is perhaps like the fourth pillar, buying an online business to create that location independent income and cash flow such that you can move abroad. Because as you said, so the main ones are getting a remote job, I guess starting your own business, freelancing, or buying a business. And I think buying a business is a very underrated way to start working online.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And do you find that a lot of the buyers that you worked with, anecdotally, they were buying for that reason to sort of like create that freedom business, and it was sort of their first foray into working online and like acquiring some location independent income?
Absolutely. And I think it was a lot of also like, I think there was obviously, I mean, it's really just the freedom aspect as a whole. Maybe not necessarily like I want to move abroad, but maybe like I want to retire. I want to quit my job. I am sick of
Mm,
commuting. Um, I think it was a lot of just like, I want to make a better lifestyle for myself. And I think this is the path to doing it. So tons of buyers in that camp for sure.
yeah. Because, I mean, think about it. Let's say you have 200K, you can buy an apartment, or you could buy a business that cash flows $5,000, $6,000 a month.
Yeah, man. I mean, I invest in real estate in the U.S. And I can tell you like the amount of capital that I've put into real estate. Had I bought some online businesses, the cash flow would have been significantly higher.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, Yeah, there was one guy, Jared Krause. Have you heard his? He's like this Australian guy, the
Yep.
buying online businesses podcast.
Yep. Yep.
There was a period where I listened to a lot of that. It'd be like, he have the accent, and he was helping basically Australian sort of really like blue collar guys. Like these would be guys that made money as plumbers or in mining or just really like blue collar Australian guys, and he'd help them basically buy their first business, get that online income, and then he'd be following up with these guys a year later, and they're all in Bali and Vietnam and all that.
Yep. I definitely I know exactly who you're talking about. I haven't actually ever met him or talked to him, but I like he had I don't know if he still has, but some kind of like whatever referral deal with Empire Flippers, and I would talk to a lot of his leads, so I like know I know exactly the type that you're talking about.
That's funny. And do you find that people with a non-technical background could be successful at this?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think it's highly possible. I think you'd want to be smart with like what kind of business you'd look to buy. Like I think if kind of you have like your primary question is like, do I want to run like a physical product type of business, or do I want something that's more like content focused? And then from there you can kind of move down your I guess like questions of what's important to you. But yeah, I think that it's not super technical. I mean, I wouldn't recommend a first time buyer to like go jump into a SaaS company that's going to require like heavy maintenance and more of a technical kind of like lens to run. But I definitely think that there's some easier type of businesses for people to run, and I think it's not that complex once you kind of like know where to look and kind of how to run these businesses.
Hmm. Yeah. What would you say would be the best beginner friendly business models?
I think Amazon, it's kind of their job to make it easy for you. So like Amazon FBA is like they want you to stay on their platform. They want you to make sales. Like their success is your success. So like for a long time, you know, they made it quite easy. I mean, they charge a price obviously to make it that easy with um, all of their fees, but like you know Amazon FBA where they kind of handle pick and pack, and they handle all of the back end logistics and make it pretty easy for your marketing. That's an easier one. Um, I guess SEO maybe not as easy, but I think content can definitely be done too, like a content based website. Um, you know, I've acquired and exited a couple of content based websites. I had no experience, and I didn't think it was necessarily too difficult to learn the fundamentals of SEO. And I think you know you don't have to be an absolute SEO like guru to run a content based website by any stretch.
Hmm. So you think FBA would actually, or FBA and or affiliate would be easier than a content site?
Well,
Or I guess,
I think I'm looping affiliate underneath the content bucket. I would
yeah,
say
yeah.
content.
Sorry, I was going to correct myself too. Yeah, affiliate is definitely contact. But you think so? You think FBA would be easier than content?
I think it's more probably like what type of person you are. Um, I think if you're interested in like actually making content and you know going through that process, that could be like I was really like when I was deciding for myself, I was extremely interested in going the content route because I really liked SEO and I really liked learning about it. And I also like thinking about my life position was like I didn't have a ton of money to be constantly reinvesting into inventory. So that's definitely a consideration if you do decide to go the physical product route is like you need to be thoughtful as to like what the cash conversion cycle of the products are going to be and how quickly you're going to get paid, and if you have money to actually grow and continue to fund and a physical product based business because inventory is you know something that you have to consider. And I was more of a like scrappier bootstrap when I was acquiring these sites. I was more of a scrappy bootstrapper that was kind of like more interested in just grinding it out. So for me, content made a lot of sense. And also, like I said, I was just interested in SEO.
Yeah. Makes sense. I always thought AdSense would be easier than FBA because, but I guess it depends if you're sourcing from the US or you're sourcing from China.
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind, like you're not starting from scratch, so you're buying that supplier relationship. You're skipping all of like the setup, so
Mm,
you get to skip a lot of like the getting the products patented and sourcing, and that's the stuff. Like the actual launch process is what takes the time most of the time. Whereas like the operations of an Amazon FBA business, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's the sourcing and launching and setup. That's what you're paying to essentially skip, and that's a huge head start.
agreed. One random question was when I looked at the FBA businesses, they would always say, basically, as an Empire Flippers policy, um, they would say inventory sold separately or inventory extra, right? And so you'd have the multiple for the business, and then you'd have to pay extra for the inventory. And I'm sure there's like total is a totally reasonable thing to do. But part of me was just like, wait, so this guy is selling this business, it's like hair clips or whatever the hell it is. And then he wants me to buy the friggin' hair clips too. Like, how do I know? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
As this guy, you know what I mean? Like, how, can you help me wrap my head around that?
yeah, that's pretty commonplace in like the M&A world that inventory will be bought separately. And I mean, it's ultimately just something like not all the time. Like I have seen deals where inventory is included in the purchase price. One strategy that I would recommend to if I was advising someone to on a buy deal is, and maybe it wasn't like a super competitive deal that they were competing against like six other buyers against, is you could always just like negotiate to have that essentially financed. So like as you sell through the inventory, you're making the payments via those sales. So like let's say
Mm,
you have 1,000 units of widget X and you sell, it's going to take you 6 months to sell through them. Like every whatever month or 2 or 3 months, the inventory that sells out of that 1,000, you could just make a payment to the buyer. I think that's a smart way to like negotiate and get like a bit of a note or like a holdback on the inventory payment if that's something that's important to you. But you're definitely right. Like most most deals, especially for like bigger deals, inventory is going to be just bought at the product landed cost.
hmm And by the way, Martin, hopefully people are finding this interesting. We won't make the whole episode about Empire Flippers, but I do find it really interesting, the buying online businesses thing. And I had one question I really wanted to ask you, which is, let's say for an AdSense site or just any website that's really heavily based on organic traffic, um, how smooth have you seen the transfer processes be from one owner to another? And is it typical to see like a fall off in traffic during the transfer process, or do the websites typically like not skip a beat and they keep going?
Yeah, it can usually like you'll have built in kind of like maybe you'll if you're a savvy buyer, you might have like a small period built in just to like make sure that post acquisition everything does actually come in correctly, like a verification period, if you will. That said, it's usually not an issue just so long as like the actual site. If you're migrating like a website, you just don't want it to actually like lose time up. So like when you're migrating hosting, you just want to make sure that it's like never losing any downtime or like it's offline for whatever reason. I mean, I've personally acquired a couple of sites and I've sold them and I had no issues. But I think um, the majority of times it's not a huge issue. I think there can be issues. So like particularly with AdSense, one prerequisite to buy an AdSense business is like you need to have an account. So you have to have already like approved AdSense account
Mm-hmm.
generally ready to go if the owner is just like not willing to give you theirs, for example. So that's something that you need to be aware of. But otherwise, like it's pretty seamless, I would say. Website migrations.
Okay, pretty seamless.
Yep. Yep. There shouldn't be any reason that you would lose like SEO rankings because the content's still the same. Like the website structure, it's all still the same. You know what I mean? It's just like you're just literally migrating hosting. And like, let's say you are just a business owner, you own a website, and you're like, well, I'm sick of SiteGround. I want to go to Bluehost or whatever site that you want to, or whatever hosting company you want to go with. You also will have to like go through that same process of migrating to a new host. So it's no different than doing that essentially.
Okay. And even if like cuz different hosts, they might have different page speed, they're located in different data centers in different countries potentially. If it's international, let's say you buy, a European or Australian website and then bring the hosting to the States, there are like factors that can change things, right?
I mean, if you're gonna like severely like, let's say you have a beast's website that has like, I don't know, thousands of pages, and like it's a bulky, slow website that has an insanely like good hosting plan, and then you just decide to cheap out and go for like the $2 a month hosting plan on whatever hosting site, that might impact things if like the site just gets extremely slow. So I think you'd want to probably, like, the ultimate safest bet would just be to stick with the same company that, like, let's say you're a buyer,
Yeah.
you'd probably just
Yeah.
want to stick with the same exact company that the seller is hosting with. It's the safest, like, best bet, and like the same plan. I think it's just the easiest. And then, after you've had the site and you see that things are working properly and you're a bit more comfortable, you can always change at a later time. I think that's like the safest.
Yeah, for sure. And you've personally acquired and flipped a few content sites, eh?
Yeah, I did. Just because I have seen so many deals, I have a pretty keen eye as to like what makes a good deal. So I've acquired a handful, and my strategy was always like buy and flip and go for more like exit type of liquidity events. I think that's just like my stage in life and what I'm looking to do, more of a needle mover than just like cash flowing something. So I've acquired a couple sites and flipped them. I'm not actively doing that. That's just because, mainly because I thought that valuations came up quite a bit in 2021 and 22. So maybe now that we're coming back down, it's something I might look to do again, honestly. Just because, like, yeah, like I said, I have a good like buyer's lens, and I know what things should relatively be valued. So if I see something that's just a no brainer, like, yeah, I'll for sure acquire it, and maybe flip it in a 6 month to a year type of scenario.
So what do you look for?
I'm a big fan of, speaking for content itself, I'm a big fan of consistency. Like, I just want to see a great track record. So I like the sites that are like, 10 years old, content is all very unique, probably maybe like written by the actual owner themselves. They're not super educated as to like, they don't maybe know that they can even sell the site. Like, I think those types of deals are generally going to be winners. I like more of a advertising revenue as opposed to affiliate type of revenue, just because I think keywords for like, best hosting on the internet or whatever, like those are going to be way more competitive and way more like targeted keywords, as opposed to like how to brush my cat's teeth. You know what I mean? So you can more easily rank for content like that, and it's just lower hanging fruit that you can capture on the back end via advertising revenue.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Those are definitely the gems where it's not built to sell. It's like a more of a passion business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan, and I like anything that's, got multi-year, like pretty safe, like consistent cash flow. I'm a big fan. And, to me, that signifies it should be priced at a premium, like those criteria points. And yeah, if it's not priced at a premium, well, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna pick this up then. So low risk acquisition for me. I can maybe make some like quick improvements. Maybe something's like got an ad, Google AdSense type of monetization method, and I know that there's some other networks that pay more, and I want to switch to them. Pay out like higher RPMs and pay more for the traffic. Like, those are the no brainer deals for me.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense. Cool, man. Well, yeah, we can switch gears. That was really cool to hear about all the online business stuff, and maybe with my ADD, I'll ask more later. But we'll mix it up for now. So you're from Minnesota. um, was was escaping the winter a part of the part of the reason you decided to start living abroad?
Man, I'm actually such a baby with winter now. It's funny you mentioned that. Like I left Buenos Aires because of the winter, because I was like, man, I can't do it. But I mean, it's really like the winter here is like not bad at all. We're talking like never goes below freezing. Usually at the warmest part of the day, like 1 p.m., it's still gonna be like, sunshine, maybe like low like 10, 15 degree type of deal. So it's like not that bad, right? But now that I've seen the light, yes, I cannot understand why anyone would ever like settle and live through Minnesota winters for sure. Um, but I think like the original kind of like draw for me abroad was like I didn't travel abroad as a kid, and my university had like a really awesome requirement. Like looking back on it, it changed my life. So shout out to them. Thankfully they had it, but they required you to study abroad in order to graduate. So I think that's a really cool thing. And I saw all my friends like we're going to like the typical like Barcelona, London, Amsterdam, whatever. And I wanted to just go completely into like something new. So I chose Bangkok, Thailand. Spent a semester abroad in Bangkok. And I think what really did it for me was just like the cost of living and how much you can upgrade your life based on like the lower cost living and still live in like a cool place with activities and everything that you do back home, maybe even more. And just like that cost of living like really really attracted me when I was younger. So I think that's one aspect, and just the sheer adventure. It's like it's just fun, you know what I mean? So that's like what really got me into kind of like moving abroad and travel abroad lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Because you did the Bangkok exchange, and then your first trip to Latin America was in 2017 when you went to Colombia, and then you made the move abroad full time in 2018. When you made the move full time, where did you go?
Yeah, so I'll just give even a little bit more context. So I was in my, I guess, like junior year of college. I did a semester in Bangkok, and then I went back for like my, I guess, my senior year, and I didn't really have much classes my second semester to like fulfill. So I was like, man, I went back to Thailand. So I spent like a year in Thailand in like Southeast Asia when I was in university. And then after that, the first place that I went abroad, like moving, I went to actually Vietnam. And that was just because the Empire, like, I don't know if Empire Flipper still does this, but back when you worked with them, they have like a company meetup, and all the guys, the whole team was in Vietnam, and they want you to like come on board and like be a part of the team there. So that's where I went. And then I went to Europe after that. And then I made my way to LATAM after that.
That's awesome. And did you want to go back to Colombia, or did you want to keep exploring?
Um, so I went to Mexico. Actually, like shout out my Latin life. I went to Mexico City in like 2017 or 18, just because obviously like the old founder was a pretty big fan of Mexico City and like wrote a lot about it. And I was like, wow, this seems like a cool place. So I took a weekend trip there when I was living still in the States, and I was in Europe and winter was coming, and I was like, man, I'd like to go live in Mexico City for a little bit. So yeah, I mean, my plan was to continue on downwards, probably via Colombia and then continuing on south. But I actually ended up staying in Mexico City for like a year, and kind of in Mexico for a year. It kind of has a tendency to trap you, that country.
Hmm. That's awesome. So you were reading the city guides and stuff back in the day.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it was like the trip that I was going to Colombia, or I can't remember, but yeah, I found my Latin life, um, and it definitely, I mean, it inspired me to go to Mexico City for sure.
What did you like about OG Vance's writing style, that and kind of the way he did his content? did you find it helpful in terms of like learning the culture, inspiring you, you know?
Man, I think he had a good job of like conveying, like I think number one, he was funny, so like you could really relate and like put yourself, like you felt like you were there. I feel like when he was writing about uh his experiences in Mexico City, like I could be like, wow, I could, like, that could be me there, you know what I mean? So I think he does a really good job of that kind of writing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I said that when I recorded the podcast with OG Vance that Vance is almost like that. There's a little bit of Vance in all of us, and you know.
Totally. Yeah, totally, man.
So you picked Mexico City. You stayed there for a while. Did you meet Freddie Lansky in Mexico City? Have you ever met up with him in person?
Yeah. I met Freddie a ton of times all around the world. I definitely met him. I probably met him for the first time in Mexico City, but I've hung out with him. We hung out in Ukraine. We hung out in Colombia. We hung out. Trying to think if there's been anywhere else. I mean, a bunch of times in Mexico, obviously, because we had like a pretty big crew that was living in Mexico at the time.
That's awesome. Tell me about the crew. Tell me about what the vibe was like in Mexico City during your time there.
Oh yes, the old days of Mexico. I think there was like a big crew that like moved there. Maybe I want to say like 2015, 16, 17 ish, and like the crew kind of was filling up then. And allegedly, I mean, what the guys told me is before the earthquake, Mexico City was just like an insanely cool place. And then kind of the vibe changed post 2018 earthquake, and got a little bit quieter and maybe like a little bit, I don't know, just maybe like not as fun, perhaps. Like some bars closed down, things like that. I moved there in like December of 2018, met all the guys. I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, some of them still live there for sure, but I think a lot of the guys have like moved on from there. But yeah, it was a ton of fun, man. I mean, one thing that I've like really found was, I found it extreme. I made some like really good Mexican friends and made good local connections. And I haven't really been able to recreate that outside of like Brazil. I think Brazil and Mexico are two countries where it's like super easy to be friends with like the locals and make good connections. And like, that's something that I definitely appreciate. And I think like for me, I was a younger expat in my like younger 20s. I think like when you are at that stage of your life, like things just seem more fun because you just have less life experience, right? So I think for me, like I was just having an absolute blast, like hanging out with Mexicans, going to like Valle de Bravo with them on the weekends, and like going on trips with like, all these people. And I think that was like something that was super unique. And I think as I get older, that'll maybe be like harder to recreate, or maybe people always say it gets harder to make friends as you get older. So I think it's like, I'm very, very happy that, and like feel blessed that like I got to live kind of like my early 20s and like kind of travel around and have those types of experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I've definitely been able to experience that too. I think it's great when there's a WhatsApp group and everyone's active and everyone's trying to do cool stuff pretty much every day of the week.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that was definitely the vibe.
Where do you think most people went after Mexico City when they moved on?
Good question. I think, I personally, I mean, I went to Buenos Aires and I went with a couple of actually like old Mexico City guys. Some guys went to Brazil. Um, I think some guys like maybe moved back to the US or just like more of like a more nomadic stage. But I think a lot went to like Brazil, honestly. Obviously you still got a couple of the guys that are still there, but I think South America, or more just like perpetual traveler type of guys, um, is really what happened.
Because there's a mix of different archetypes, right? There's guys that still spend a lot of time in the States. There are guys that swear they'll never go back again, or at least spend less than 30 days and do the foreign income exclusion.
Yep.
There's there. I mean, I imagine a bunch of people have done residency in Mexico now.
Yep. Yep. I think most, I'm trying to think of my friends that I had in Mexico City. I think most are either in South America or just like I said, perpetual travelers. Some definitely did go back to the US, and I think maybe are just like, living in Austin, kind of like doing that type of lifestyle now. But yeah, the crowd really kind of like disband. I think I don't know. I think Mexico City really. I actually went back to Mexico for like a whole nother year during most of 2020. It was kind of like, I mean, I think it was like the whole world's pandemic haven. So that's where I spent most of my time. Not the whole time in Mexico City. I was doing a lot of traveling around Mexico, but um, yeah, I think a lot of us have kind of like I think a lot of guys that are are we're in similar shoes to me, and I think a lot of us have like a bit of a like salty taste towards Mexico now.
So you were there during COVID.
Yep, yep,
Did
most
you
of it.
hear about during that time about Bradicus like getting banned from Mexico?
I think I heard about it, but I didn't know like when that was or like how it happened. I don't really know him, so I don't. I just like heard rumblings about that. Yeah.
Well, that was that time. That was that time. It was like, like July 2020.
And that was
Um,
Mexico City specifically.
yeah, it was Mexico City for the most part. A little bit in Puebla, but mostly Mexico City. And this guy got banned from Mexico. He burned down Mexico City.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, that's crazy. I was in
Yeah.
I think July. I was not in Mexico City. I think I went to Playa actually for my first ever time. I think I went to Playa like in this is like real world closed down type of stuff. So even like Playa was closed down in like June and July, but there was like a huge squad that was out there just like, working. We would like rent a gym and like pay this guy to open it up for an hour for us. It was like, it was some dark days well, I guess it was kind of fun in a way, but it was, yeah, those were some times.
hmm Yeah, I was in Playa for part of it. I think like Bar Loco never closed the whole time.
Yeah.
uh, there were a couple bars and stuff that paid to stay open.
Oh man, so maybe we were there at the same. I was there like July, I think like June, July, August, like the hottest time. And then I kind of went to Guadalajara. I went to Mexico City, and then I went to Mazatlan, and then I went to Guadalajara. I was kind of hopping all over the place, just trying to like go to wherever was open for the longest time.
hmm hmm So you've been living full time abroad since 2018. So that basically, in my mind, anyone that's been doing it pre-pandemic is basically a pioneer in terms of working remote, living remote. So you've been doing it like 4+ years now.
Yeah, I guess I've been abroad like total like five. If you count like the Thailand stuff and like other stuff, like yeah, most of my like five-ish years, I guess.
hmm And I know you spent over a year in Asia, close to a year in Europe, and I guess like 4 years in Latin America, 3, 4 years. How do you think about where to spend your time, and sort of the trade off between these places? Are you like 100% Latin America now, or do you still kind of, or do you feel like less tied down to the region and you'll just kind of go wherever?
Yeah, so I was probably never I when I was like after my time in Southeast Asia, like I really wanted to just live out there and I thought it was the most fun ever. I think I think Southeast Asia is really good for you like someone in their like young 20s like backpacker type of stage. I think each part of the world serves different purposes basically. And I think it's really good for like the younger 20s, like, it's safe, it's got a good like backpacking network. I think it's really great for that, like that type of trip for someone. I also think it's really good, like just the services in Southeast Asia and like getting things done and like having, you can just go get your feet rubbed for like $5 an hour. You know what I mean? Like it's just a really convenient lifestyle that caters to someone that's like really trying to be hyper productive, build a business, and like be focused. I think it's more of like the money train, if you will. Um, and then I think like I never really had a ton of interest in Europe. I went to Ukraine, like that would have been summer of 2021. So I was there for like 3 months. I've spent some time in Prague in the Czech Republic, a little bit of time in like London, and done some just traveling in Europe. It's never really called my attention, honestly, Europe as a whole. Um, and then I mean, I got to Latin America, and I think what really, really like makes it hard to leave Latin America is once you speak the languages, man. Like I think once you speak Spanish, you know, if you go to Brazil and you speak Portuguese, it just becomes so hard to like give that up because like you don't see many people out in Thailand speaking Thai or like many people in Russia or Ukraine speaking Russian. It's sometimes happens out there, but not super often. And I think like once you command the language, it just gets really hard to leave. And then you just kind of, I mean, I love the lifestyle, you know, like I love the lifestyle. So it's really hard for me to want to leave now. I don't know if you feel the
Yeah,
same way.
I do. It's almost like once you learn Spanish and Portuguese and you're basically playing on easy mode and everyone thinks you're cool, it's kind of hard to go to another region and kind of have to start again or not have the same advantages.
I definitely think it's that. And I just think like, yeah, you can just really have just just a fun time, honestly. And I think like I wanted to spend the majority of my remaining 20s and probably even like a lot of my 30s in LATAM. And then, you know, maybe I'll reassess after that. But I do think it's very beneficial to take a break. So I took a break, went to Ukraine for 3 months. I was getting pretty burnt out. Like I was really burnt out on Mexico, like to the point where I was like not in a good place. And I went out to Ukraine, and then I was like, wow, I miss speaking Spanish. I miss like the listening to reggaeton. Like I miss it all. And then I got back and I was like, oh, like I feel like I'm at home again. And I was just so happy to be back, and kind of like took everything that I had been taking for granted. I like got that back right away. So I think that is a underrated aspect to guys that just like go at it for like 10 years straight. You know what I mean? And get like salty
Yeah, it's good to mix it up, get some perspective.
for sure.
You you had mentioned language learning as a topic that you wanted to potentially talk about on the podcast. What's your language learning journey been like?
Yeah. So I think it kind of ties into like what I was saying, just like how much it can like change your experience and time. So the way I learned Spanish was like a really dumb way, and I didn't really like dedicate time or like try and learn it. So I did a year in Mexico. It was really slow. I didn't even like try to like learn it that much. And then I got to Argentina, and I feel like the English levels were just so much lower, and like it was like honestly a necessity to learn. So I dedicated a bit more time to it, and I actually just started taking like straight conversational practice. And like I knew a little bit of Spanish at this, like I wasn't like a complete like lost like gringo perdido like in Playa del Carmen, you know what I mean? But like I dedicated a little bit of just like conversational practice and like got a lot of it down. And then just through I just think speaking and immersion and just forcing the speaking, I think it just like can get you there so quickly. And then Portuguese, I was way smarter because I knew I was going to go to Brazil this year, and I knew I was going to spend three-ish months in Brazil during the winter here. And I took like 15 to 20 hours of just straight speaking conversational classes. And I mean, as you speak conversational Spanish and Portuguese, right?
Hmm.
So like, you know, the verbs are similar, like everything's fairly similar. So like, I think if you just do that and just like, if you already can speak Spanish, like you can learn Portuguese pretty quickly. So I think, and also like you have the benefit of having the confidence of learning a language. So like you know what you say in conversation, you know what's important and like what verbs you're going to use. So like you can just like really streamline learning a second or a third language once you've got that second one down, especially if it's like a, you know, something so similar to like Spanish and Portuguese and Italian and French and that type of language. So um,
Mm.
yeah, I think I was way smarter about it with Portuguese because I hit the ground running and like no one speaks English in Brazil. So like you need to speak Portuguese, you know what I mean?
What did you change about your method? Because for me, what I did was for my, I guess, second foreign language, I spent less time reading and more time listening, and I think listening was huge for me.
Definitely listening, whether it's like YouTube videos or podcasts. So definitely listening and just also just, I mean, just like having conversations. So like hiring a one-on-one tutor to just like, not even like, hey, we're going to learn how to, conjugate this verb, but just literally having like forcing the conversation. And then over time, like, what you don't know, and you can just focus on those types of like interactions. And also, actually, one thing I did with Portuguese, which was a very like underrated thing, was I would listen to a song and like read the song lyrics with my Portuguese teacher, and
Hmm.
that's cool because it gives you like a lot of like contextual stuff and like slang and a lot of like the culture too. So I thought that worked really well for me personally.
Yep, I'd agree with that. I think music definitely helps, especially if it's not reggaeton or funky.
Yeah.
Something that's I guess more easier for beginners.
A little bit more substance to it maybe.
Some rock and country and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's so funny. It's like you can listen to reggaeton, understand maybe 30%, and then you can go to like an old school like Luis Miguel, and it's like, oh, I understand this perfectly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, Portuguese is. I mean, like the funky lyrics are pretty insane. I would like try and do like a funky song with my Portuguese teacher, and he's like, "Man, I honestly don't know what they're saying here."
Right. It's like I don't want to explain this. And so what are some of the like favorite cities that you've lived in? Give us just sort of like a rundown of some of your top spots.
Yeah, so I'm a big city. I mean, I grew up in a town of like 10,000 people, super boring, and since then I've just loved big city life. At least for now, it just suits me. So I've like focused all my time in like the bigger cities. So I mean, I spent about a year and a half in Mexico City. Loved it. Don't think I'll really ever go back though. I've spent probably like 7 or 8 months total in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Um, I was actually feeling a little bit burnout on travel, and I wanted to kind of like find where my next, I guess, like base was going to be, and that was kind of what I was doing this year. Was I wanted to go to a couple of cities that I wanted to check out and consider living in. So I went to I was in Bogota, Colombia. I came back to Buenos Aires. So I did like a 3 month stint, and then I went. I really wanted to like Sao Paulo, so I did like a month and a half in Sao Paulo, and then I ended up just like traveling around. I went to Belo Horizonte, and then I did some like just like beach stuff in Brazil for like a month as well. Um, I've spent some time in Lima, um, Guadalajara. I really like Guadalajara, actually. I think if I were to move back to Mexico, it'd probably be Guadalajara. Um, and yeah, those are like the major spots that are like that I'm keen to check out. I really want to go to Bolivia. I don't know if you've been there, and I really want to go to actually like Ecuador. Those are the two places I'd like to go in South America. And then I'm just like, I've never been to Central America, and I'm super keen to go check out like the Guatemala and like Honduras and El Salvador and those kinds of places.
Hmm.
I don't know if
What
you've
about
been to any of
Paraguay?
those places. Uh, Paraguay. So I've got we've probably got some mutual friends that have been there and liked it and lived there.
OG Vance.
OG Vance, man, you can tell me if I'm wrong. You've been there, right?
Yeah, I've been there with OG Vance, like rooming with him and stuff.
So tell me if my preconception is wrong, but I feel like there's just nothing to do in Asuncion. I feel like it's an extremely boring city that like just because it's different gets some hype on the like amongst the I guess like crew on the internet. Like I feel like like OG Vance maybe put it on the map, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there. Like maybe it's an awesome spot.
I think it's fun. I think it depends what you're into, but I mean, similar to Buenos Aires in the sense that there's no beach, so it's a lot of like, I guess, urban entertainment, whether that be nightclubs, theater, movies, whatever it is, culture stuff. So, it's going to be more culture heavy and less nature heavy, but you can always get out of the city and go visit some of the miradores and do some cool hikes and stuff not too far out of the city. I really enjoy the culture. I just think it's awesome just sitting around and drinking yerba mate. And it's obviously expected to be slower, but I don't think it's like that slow paced at the same time. It kind of depends if you're like single or in a relationship and stuff. But I don't know. I never get bored there.
Noted. Yeah, maybe I'll go. I mean, it's so close. Maybe I'll go check it out. I want to go. I think top of my list, like in South America, is I want to go do some like Nordeste Brazil stuff.
Hmm.
I definitely want to. I've been wanting to go to Bolivia for the longest time. I just think it's like super a fascinating place for whatever reason. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, I'll probably go. I'll probably go to Paraguay at some point.
It's actually it has a long relationship with Argentina and with Buenos Aires because what happened was Buenos Aires was founded, and then for whatever reason, I don't know if it was like a flood or natives, but basically they like the original founding of Buenos Aires, they didn't make it, and then they all went up to Asuncion. They went up the river. They founded Asuncion. Then Asuncion was around, and then they went back and did the second founding of Buenos Aires from Asuncion. And so Asuncion and Buenos Aires have always had a good relationship because Asuncion is known as like the La Madre de Ciudades, like the mother city. And a lot of cities, I think Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Bolivia, and Buenos Aires, and lots of other Argentine cities were all founded for people from by people who were setting off from Asuncion. So it's a very old city, has a lot of history.
Interesting. I didn't know any of that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Hmm. And there's lots of Paraguayan people that live in Buenos Aires. Like if you go to um, meetup events and stuff like that, or anywhere really, you'll eventually meet some Paraguayans that are studying in Buenos Aires and stuff like that. So there's a good relationship. Obviously, they both love they both love yerba mate and stuff. I think what's cool about Paraguay is it sort of combines all the best things about Argentine and Brazilian culture and sort of takes the things they like about it. So they'll take, you know, from Argentina, they'll take the cuts of meat, they'll take the espresso, they'll take the yerba mate. What else is empanadas? So they'll have like all the same types of empanadas, like calabrese and that type of stuff. And then they'll take the best of Brazil too, right? So you can get acai on every corner. You can get Brazilian style coffee too, loaded with sugar. Um, what else? You can get cachaça everywhere in all the stores. And so Paraguay is kind of like at the, I don't know, it's they sort of take things that they like from the other cultures, which I think is cool.
Yeah, that's you got me a little bit more interested now. I've heard so I've met some Paraguayans here, and they're like super. I mean, just very very friendly people, as one would expect. And I think that I've heard a lot of people say it's like it's like very similar to Brazil almost, and like should almost be a part of Brazil. But I think that's probably like a more accurate, like a mixture of the two. Would probably be. Do they have like you know how in Brazil everybody just kind of like sits around and drinks like a cervejinha and like that's kind of like what they always do. Do they have that similar culture in
Yeah,
Asuncion?
for sure. Yeah, it's a very similar like boteco culture where they just sit out on patios and drink and stuff like that. I would say for sure.
Interesting.
And
Oh, maybe I'll
you
go.
can get the Brazilian type of beer, which is very different. It's like colder than normal beer, and the foam is different. And so you can get like Brazilian style shoppy in Paraguay.
Interesting. Maybe, well, now you've got my interest peaked a little bit. Maybe I'll go check out
Yeah.
Paraguay
And they call
this year
it
next.
birra, the same
Birra?
as just like the Argentines do.
Yep, yep.
So I think it's cool. I mean, I've, yeah, I think it's worth a visit. It'll be a direct flight from Buenos Aires if you can manage it. You
Yeah,
seem
it's
like the type of guy that you want to eventually hit every country. So I think Paraguay, like no one, everyone likes Paraguay when they visit. They're not really sure why, and it's hard to like report back. Uh, but it's just in the vibe. You just like feel good when you're there. It's hard to explain.
for sure. I mean, I bet the people are just like super friendly. Doesn't receive a lot of tourists. Like I bet it's pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure. So you said if you were going to move back to Mexico, you would choose Guadalajara, but you've been to Mazatlan, you've been to some other cities. What do you think are like the top like growing digital nomad hotspots, or for you best places to live in Mexico?
Oh, best places to live in Mexico. I have traveled a lot around Mexico, honestly. I think obvious like I'm just going to say that nowhere in the Yucatan Peninsula, or at least in Quintana Roo, is like worth going to at this point. I'm just gonna. I mean, it's nice maybe for like a weekend or like a visit, but for me, for living, it's too touristy. It's got way too much traffic with the Cancun airport, so I wouldn't go live out there personally. I think I always liked, like, honestly, I always liked the west coast of Mexico way more too. So like for beach spots, I always thought like Puerto Vallarta was better than Cancun. I always liked visiting Mazatlan. I always I loved Puerto Escondido back like way more than Tulum. So I think the west coast of Mexico is definitely like offers more if like just a pristine white beach and crystal clear water isn't like your only thing that you care about. Like I think you can have way more fun and like just have like a more authentic experience on the west coast. I've never been to Baja California, so I can't speak to it. um I think Guadalajara has a lot of like similar vibes to like Chicago in the United States, whereas like your Mexico City would be your LA, New York, where I went solo to Guadalajara and I made tons of like cool Mexican friends, like always inviting me out to like go to parties and do everything. And that was like a really unique experience for me. And I think that that's super easy to do in Guadalajara. I just think that the people are really nice. I think the city is like pretty cool, has good food, fun nightlife. Definitely like less than a Mexico City, but I could see it being a cool spot. I think Puebla is also like I've only been there for like a weekend, but I think Puebla is pretty cool. I've never been to Monterrey, so I wouldn't know, but I've been to some like more random spots. Like I've been to like Durango, Mexico.
Hmm.
I've done some stuff. I've been to like Leon, Guanajuato, San Miguel. I think those cities might be too small for your app, like Querétaro. I think they might be like a little too small and boring for like the average 20, 30 something digital nomad that wants a community. But I think like Puerto Vallarta, like the state of Jalisco as a whole, like has a potential. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I would need to live on the beach, and there's a few that I haven't been to yet, beach cities, and I almost want to just go to every single one to have like the full sample size before choosing. I've been pretty curious about like Acapulco, and a couple of the other ones. Um, Even the ones that I know probably aren't like full time livable. I still just want to kind of see what they look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like Zihuatanejo, Manzanillo, things like that.
Yeah, some guys went to Manzanillo, said it was like beautiful, but I feel like it's sleepy slow, maybe. But they said it was like a beautiful spot, so could be cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, I like that West Coast lifestyle. It's fun. You didn't
Yeah,
like
I think it depends
Mazatlan?
where you're at. It depends where you're at. It depends if you're, looking to start a family, or if you're, more just like trying to connect with digital nomads and stuff like that. Mazatlan, I think, is like close to like the perfect city.
Yeah, yeah. I think you need I feel like you kind of need a car to like really do that city justice. Like it's not the most walkable place or like Uberable place, but
Hmm.
but I think if you have a car, it could be like a good option. And then if you're like living, I really like I actually really like the like Centro part of Mazatlan and like that like more south side part of it. Um, and then I also like the beaches like up in the north, like north of like Zona Dorada. Like I like I think it's like what is it like Gaviotas or something. I like that those beaches up there. The food's
Definitely.
amazing.
So you've been doing this for a while. So like, how do you think about settling down somewhere and kind of picking a spot to maybe get like a year-round lease? Is that something that crosses your mind, or are you still probably going to spend 2023 popping around a little bit?
No, man, I'm definitely getting like I was saying earlier. Like I wanted to do kind of a check where I like, and then maybe like make a decision and kind of settle somewhere. I think I'll be posted in Buenos Aires for the next like 6, 7, 8 months, pretty much, and kind of like using this as my base for now. Um, I really like the idea of living in Brazil. I just haven't necessarily found the city like that I would want to necessarily like live, I guess, like 8 to 12 months a year in. But I think my ultimate setup is probably like I don't think I ever want to spend 12 months in one city. That's not to say like I won't have like a year-round lease or, like a more permanent spot, but I think a nice lifestyle for me would maybe be like, do like this was I actually got this idea from Freddie Lansky, but like the Freddie Lansky model of doing like a 8 to 9 months in your home base like city, get your work done, do all your things, and then maybe do like a 2 or 3 month or 4 month a year like travel around. So go to like get some beach time, get some whatever it may be. Maybe go to a different part of the world and refresh on LATAM, or go home to North America, visit family, like something like that. I think that's a
Hmm.
model that would probably work pretty well for me. But I think 12 months a year in like one country or one place like that for me gets a little bit exhausting. Like I just get a little bit like not even like restless, but I just get honestly like all my friends who know me will laugh if they listen to this, but I get salty. Like I get like annoyed by like a lot of the things. So I need to like go refresh and get a fresh like perspective.
I think the Freddie Lansky model of having a base and then doing some traveling from a base is going to be increasingly a smart idea, just as Airbnb is getting so friggin' expensive relative to the actual local rate. And I think the disparity between the market rate for a 1 year lease and the 1 month Airbnb rate, I think that disparity is growing a lot. And so if you can lock down a 1 year lease and then Airbnb it if you need to on the side a little bit, but just have that spot, sort of locking in your price, I think that's a good idea, because one of the things that's been annoying this year is just hopping on Airbnb and realizing that anywhere you want to go, it's like $2,000 or more US for like a studio, and you're like, what the hell? This was maybe $1,000 a year ago,
You're
or two
absolutely
three years
right.
ago.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I like Buenos Aires is absolutely absurd. Like what the Airbnb versus like long term market. Like the place that I live in, like I'm on a lease, and like the place that I live in would be easily 3 to 4 times the price that like I'm paying on like a lease. So yeah, I mean, if you think about that, like okay, like let's say I want to do like let's say I'm planning to just be a digital nomad and live 12 months a year in Airbnb, and you're gonna whatever factor in like let's call it 2K a month, and you're spending what 24, 25 grand on your housing. You're better off just like having two leases. Maybe you can even do like an unfurnished type of deal, furnish it yourself. Like, cause I'm sick of Airbnb furniture as well. Like get nice furniture, get nice internet, get the things you like, get the blackout curtains, like do all the things, you know what I mean? Be comfortable. And then, I mean, you could also just sublease it like when you're not there. Like that's an option. So that's probably a model I'll look to do. I'll probably look to like most likely in the next year or two get like a long term, whether I'm going to like actually live there or not, I don't know, but do like a long term lease, probably unfurnished, probably like make it nice and have it be mine, and then just use that as my base. And whether I'm there 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, to be determined, but that's probably what I'll look to do.
Right, right. Makes sense. Have you started setting up residencies a little bit, or looking at the residency stuff? Because that's been a big focus at My Latin Life this year.
Yeah, I've got a handful, and I'm working on another, but I've got a couple.
Okay. Yeah, I won't force you to reveal anything you don't want to reveal, but is there anything that you do put out there about some of the bases you have?
I mean, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? I was living there for a long time. I think a lot of people have residency. So I was living for a long time. Like my first year, I was just doing, I mean, I was only there for a year, so it was pretty easy to like just border hop, obviously, like one time or two, however many times I did it. But then I was like, you know what? Like I'm actually living here and I would like to formalize that. So I got the residency, and I guess I will definitely, even though I'm not living there and I don't have plans to live there, I'll definitely go renew for like permanent residency, whether that's in like what 2 year. I mean, it'd be like a couple years from now. So I'll definitely go
Hmm.
back, renew it. Um, and then I've got one actually out in Asia. Um, I won't name the specific country, but I've got one out in Asia, and then I've
Is it
working
the
on a.
Thai Elite visa?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's probably an option that no one really knows. It's not very popular. Um,
The Malaysia second home one.
no, it's not via. I don't own any real estate or anything like that. No significant investment was needed to
All
be
right,
made.
sorry, and you're gonna say you had a third thing after Asia?
Yeah, and then I have I'm working on kind of like a third one right now. Don't have it yet.
Okay. Maybe offline I can convince you to do Paraguay and just take a quick flight, get set up.
Yeah, that's easy, huh?
Hmm. It's
Yeah.
like the easiest one.
Well, that's another thing. Like I think that so going back to I guess like comparing benefits of regions, like Latin America is extremely easy. If you're talking about immigrating and living and like you even if you want to do it illegal, that's one way. Like it's I mean, like I'm not going to encourage that for anyone, but if you just want to like be a perpetual tourist or whatever have you, like that's a viable option in a lot of Latin American countries. But also, if you want to do it legal and get yourself set up, like that's super easy in most countries. Like it's as simple as like I have $1,000 coming in, or I have I'm willing to make a $5,000 bank deposit. Like that's a very underrated aspect to Latin America. It's not that easy if you want to go live in the U.S. or want to go live in Europe or want to go live in Asia. I think Southeast Asia can be easy in some spots, but like that's a huge like lifestyle benefit to LATAM in my opinion.
I 100% agree. I mean, you have so many different countries. They're all very easy, especially if you have pension income or a couple different easy categories. And half the countries are territorial tax countries where you won't be taxed on your foreign earned income, aka your income from the states or you know uh, wherever online. And so I think the flexibility and the options in Latin America are just unparalleled in the rest of the world because like Europe, like the I don't. It's hard to explain, but the tax havens in Europe are not really accessible to the average person. Like,
Just
like
because it's like half a million or €1 million or whatever it is.
Yeah, not only to get in as a non-European, but even for the Europeans, because it's not like all the Europeans are all like set up in Luxembourg or Malta or Gibraltar. Like, for even for them, they're kind of like, oh, this isn't even worth it, and then they just all end up going to Dubai. So clearly, like whatever the product that the European tax havens are bringing to market is only for like a small subset of people. I guess like the super rich or something, because it's not really seeming to work for most people. Because most European guys you see flexing Rolexes on Twitter and all the rest of it. I mean, they're in Dubai. They're not really in the European tax havens, I find.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I don't know if there's. I'm sure I mean, Asia's got like Singapore,
Singapore,
Hong Kong historically.
Malaysia's territorial, I believe, as well.
Got it. I
I
think
think Philippines as well for foreign residents.
got it. And I think
So there's a
Thailand
couple.
leaves you alone, right? I don't think like any. I don't know. I haven't heard of any like people paying too much taxes, and whether it's legal or not, I haven't heard too
Well, I think
much.
it's because in Thailand they don't people don't have like real permanent residency. They just have like the 10-year visa and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Do you?
But yeah, I think Latin America is just, for people who are looking to set up bases, for people who are looking at creating a plan B, second passports, acquiring multiple passports, uh, just all that type of stuff. I really think that Latin America just makes the most sense. And for people who, would otherwise buy a vacation, maybe like everyone in Minnesota, they probably all bought places in Arizona or in Florida, somewhere warm down south. Well, you might as well just make it international, get a place in Costa Rica, Panama, whatever it is, get a second passport out of it, get a plan B out of it, and sort of increase your international footprint.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. Is that something like do you have interest in like like owning real estate and doing that kind of stuff in Latin America into the future? Or kind of like what's your how do you play it, I suppose?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a couple ways to do it. My main preoccupation would be owning real estate in the residency based taxation countries. So, owning real estate in Mexico or Brazil or Colombia or Argentina, um, because these are residency based taxation countries, just the same as Canada or, Europe. And so, like, as much as we think these countries, historically have left people alone, have left the foreigners alone, it's not always going to be like that necessarily. And if you own property that's a pretty like in your name, that's a pretty strong claim, like a substantial tie. And I think that does sort of bring you into the tax net. So I think if you're going to do it in those big four countries, you're going to want to do it probably like under an LLC or something like that, so it's not in your name. um, but then, the flip side of that is that owning property in your name will help your citizenship application. So if you want to get that second passport, owning property is going to make you have a stronger application, because in Latin America, it's not just like a day's test to get citizenship. It's not, like in Canada, it's something like if you spend 1,100 days within 5 years, you get the passport. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But in Latin America, it's more of a, okay, do you have family? Do you have ties? Like, have you spent time on the ground? And it's a bit more of a judgment based thing where, typically it'll have to get signed off by the Supreme Court and some judges, and some guys are going to kind of look at your case and be like, you know, who is this guy with no job in the country? No wife and kids in the country, no property. Like, does he even have a lease? Okay, here's an address. I don't even think it's a real lease. I think that's a lawyer's address. You know what I mean? And so people like that with a very low footprint are going to have a hard time, I think, naturalizing in the countries. And so you can start, buying property and stuff to build ties. And so my recommendation, or the way I'm thinking of it for myself, is buying property in the territorial tax countries, such that I'm not like exposing myself to tax issues, and I'm also contributing to having a stronger naturalization case. And again, just a reminder that the territorial tax countries are basically all of Central America, everything between Mexico and Colombia, which is, you know, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, etc., and then Paraguay, and then kind of Uruguay and kind of Ecuador. But basically, it's Paraguay and Central America, and then like the islands like Dominican as well.
Yeah, that's I think I completely agree. I think like I haven't thought about it to that level, but I've definitely like any place that I'm actually planning to spend a lot of time in and like live in, I don't even want to really have a bank account in if I can if I can avoid it. Like I just want to leave it as a I want to leave my playgrounds as a playground and
Mm-hmm.
leave my like, you know, places that I plan to actually whatever get residencies or potentially passports in. I want to, you know, take them a bit more seriously and follow play a little bit more by like the actual guidelines, and ideally not live in those places. I think that's, and I mean that could be applied for me as well. Like I kind of take the same approach with, you know, I'm from the United States, and I think that's kind of the same approach I take is like, you know, I hold some assets there, I hold some, I keep my like my boring stuff there, but do I want to live there necessarily? Not really. So I think that's definitely like a good way to think and like look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, if I had to summarize, I guess residency based tax countries, uh, you know, own that property in an entity, and then territorial based tax countries, you can probably own it in your name safely.
Good advice.
But I do want to start doing that. I definitely have a lot of cool ideas, even maybe within my Latin life, doing something. But I think the real estate opportunities in Latin America are huge.
Yeah, particularly if you're willing to like do a little bit more work and do like a renovation or do like a an Airbnb business, for example. I mean, as we see all the time, right? Like it's just kind of crazy like to think about like yes, most countries are probably not getting to take advantage of leverage, which obviously is like a huge advantage of real estate. Like I think correct. I mean, you might know this better than me, but I don't know if there's like too many opportunities for like traditional 30-year like fixed rate, 3, 4, 5% mortgages like in the US and Canada. So I think that that's something that obviously has to be considered. But I do think, you know, if you're willing to like do a bit of work and some like put some sweat into the property and, you know, make it more of like a, I guess real like short term rental or renting to foreigners like and making it easy for them. I think there's some huge potential.
Hmm. Yeah, a couple like there's a couple of benefits of home ownership in Latin America. There's pros and cons of home ownership in Latin America versus the States. So some of the benefits in Latin America is you're going to have much lesser sort of zoning laws and sort of rules about how you do your property. So for example, like in Canada, we were doing a renovation, and we had to get a new door, and they said, "Oh, if you leave the existing door, it's fine. If you want to get a new door, you can't get a new door that's exactly the same. You have to get a new door that's up to the new code." Right. And it's like, okay, so what's the new code? Oh, well, it needs to be like a fireproof door, and it's like $1,000 for the door. And you're like, what? And you're like, yeah, but if you just leave your door, like the one that's currently installed, it's a grandfathered in door, and it's good, right? So it's absurd, right? And then another example, I mean, how much does it cost for a guy to come, you know, paint your house, right? In the States, it's going to cost you like $500 a day or something, right? In Latin America, it might cost $30 a day to get a painter at your house, stuff like that. So home maintenance and all that can be a lot less expensive,
Yeah,
and
and
renovation
property taxes are quite a bit. But I think I
way
don't
less.
know all countries, but I've looked at it like in Mexico and Colombia, and it's significantly cheaper than what it would be in the U.S.
Yeah, they're typically way less for sure.
Kind of like once you do own, like yeah, you're putting way less money down up front, but kind of once you do own the place, you actually own the place type of deal.
Hmm. I think that's a good way of thinking of it. So, question for you, man. Like, so what keeps you like moving around to different places, or what do you really like travel for? And I guess a related question I have was, what do you think's like the best cadence in terms of amount of time per place? Is it seems that you like to do 3 months. And the thing that's interesting about 3 months versus say 1 month is I think in 1 month you can typically, like in 1 month you can get the vibe, you can learn the city, you can start meeting people, and it's great. But I feel like with 3 months, it's almost like the golden handcuffs start kicking in, and it
Hmm.
becomes hard to leave because maybe you get a girlfriend or uh, whatever it is, and you just get like too into the routine. So do you have a hard time like leaving certain places, or how do you think about cadence?
Yep. So originally I was just like living in Mexico City, and like that's what I wanted to do, like was just live there full time. Like I had a year lease. I mean, I had like long-term spot. I've never really thought of myself as like a short-term kind of like 2 to 3 month kind of guy, honestly, or like even like 1 month, a couple weeks. Like I've always liked the idea of doing longer term stints, honestly. Um, and I think that like when I wanted to, but the issue is like if you're just like I'm gonna move to this city that I've never been before, it can be a bit daunting. Like if I'm just like I've never been to Sao Paulo and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go live there for 12 months and get set up and like do that, right? Like that's kind of a crazy thing. What if I ended up hating it? What if I didn't think it was actually practical for living? Which that's kind of the conclusion that I made is like I thought that I was gonna absolutely love Sao Paulo and like it was cool, it was okay, but like I don't want to live there long term.
Hmm.
So that was like that you I think you kind of need to like go do like that sample size. And I think you're right. Like after a month, 2 months, you generally have a sense. I've been going at kind of like this 3.5 month pace recently. And I think it's because like I've identified like I've traveled so much over the last like 5, 6, 7 years that like through trial and error and like through trying all these regions and countries, like I have a pretty good understanding of like what it is that I like. I've identified what I like. So I've got a pretty good idea. So I was like, all right, these 3 places, I'm going to go try them and I'm going to do like, relatively like longer stints. And that's kind of what I'm going to do. So that's really what I've been. But like, I do think that I'll probably maybe not in 2023, but probably in 2024, look to go like a longer term option for sure. So I think for me, it's been 3 months recently has been kind of my cutoff. But like for example, I'll be in Buenos Aires for like 8 or 9 before I end up leaving and like using it as a base for like 8 or 9. So that's kind of like what I've been doing. But yeah, I don't know. I like to slow travel. I don't know. It's better for me.
Hmm.
How about you? Like, what do you think? Like, you like to go a month? Are you getting tired of traveling?
I've definitely done 1 month stints in a lot of different spots, and I do think that is a pretty good cadence because it's long enough that you get discounts on Airbnb, and you have time to see everything. So I think 1 month is way superior to like 2 weeks, um, and then 3 months is like a whole different animal, I feel. Um, but I did want to ask you about Buenos Aires and just what do you like about Buenos Aires? How do you experience Buenos Aires?
Man, Buenos Aires is a spot that is extremely hot and cold for me. Like some days I love some aspects of it, and then other days I just like some of the cultural stuff and just like the people and like so just you've been here, right?
Hmm.
So you know how like I think you probably like know probably what could annoy one or some person like after some time. And I just think that like I don't know,
ATMs.
they like the Porteños in particular, they have like a very strong culture and I appreciate that. And like the two things that I are like the couple things that I love about Brazil and Argentina in particular are that they have very strong and unique cultures. Like I kind of this is generalizing a little bit, but I kind of feel like the difference between like Mexico and Guatemala and Costa Rica and Colombia and Peru, it's not that different. Like it's not like yes, there's some differences, sure, but it's all kind of like a lot of the same to me. And I think when you get down to like this deep south, like Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, maybe Chile, things get a lot different. And I think Argentina has an extremely strong culture, and they're never gonna like they're never gonna Americanize. I think you see it in Mexico, especially. Like Mexicans love American culture, which makes it a very soft landing point for a ton of people. And I think it's a great kind of entryway into LATAM. And if you like that's probably a great option for you. Colombia is kind of like, to me, like a mini Mexico. Like they have a lot of the same conveniences, and they've been going more and more that direction. Argentina is a completely different thing. Brazil is a completely different thing. Like they think that their way is the way, and like they don't want to change to like be Americanized or, you know, change their culture. So I think like that's one thing that I like a lot. But then also like another thing that I value is making, you know, friendships with locals and getting involved. And I think the porteños, they're not necessarily like mean. A porteño is someone that lives in Buenos Aires, for people that might not know. I think that they're not like mean or rude directly. I think they get a bad rep for that actually, but they very much have a club. And if you're not like from Buenos Aires, you're not a part of the club. And that also extends to Argentinians that aren't from Buenos Aires. So like people that move here that aren't from Capital Federal, like they have trouble integrating and making friends, and like they're kind of seen as like outsiders. So that's something that can be a bit, I guess, like frustrating if you're coming here and trying to live here.
For sure. Any like specific examples that come to mind?
Um, I think I just think like like if I were to go like try and make friends with like some Porteño guys, like they probably wouldn't just be like inviting me. It would take a long time to like build their trust and like actually integrate into their social circles. Um, Trying to think of like other, like you need to have like, this is more evident in Brazil, like where you need to have I forget the CPF. You need to have like the security number to like go buy a drink at the bar. Like you have to have a social security number. Like it's just not set up really like for foreigners and
Buenos
outsiders.
Aires?
What's that?
In Buenos Aires? You're
No, no.
experiencing that?
This was in reference to Brazil, but Argentina has cases of that where like if you want to buy something on Mercado Libre, like you need to have a local like social security number to do it. Um,
Damn.
so that kind of stuff can like make it difficult for just like someone coming to try and live here. I'm trying to think of what else they just really like to like meriendar at 6 p.m. in the afternoon, and like they are going to start their parties at 3 in the morning. Like it just is what it is. And like, it's very much a strong kind of like in your face culture. And that's just like it's just who they are, and they just love it.
What are your favorite parts about Buenos Aires?
Favorite parts. I think that I like that it's international within Latin America. So you can very easily meet people from Colombia, Brazil, Paraguay, like you were mentioning. Like it's kind of like the hub for other Latin American countries to come and move to. It's sort of like their like New York City almost for like the Spanish speaking world. So I mean here in probably Mexico City, but I feel like here is more like South America people, I would say. So I like that. It's very like walkable. Like obviously the architecture is cool. It's beautiful. I think it's just like like the weather is usually pretty good most of the year, especially in like the fall and spring months. Even the winter is like, even I complained about it earlier, but it's not that bad. I think if you're a younger person, like if you're young 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, like basically in your 20s, it can be a super fun place. But I think like it's really good for like partying and nightlife. Like there's humongous venues. We're talking like thousands of people going to like, they call them boliches. So like huge parties that are like unique. And they stay out until, 7, 8 a.m., which again, I think that's cool if you're like in your 20s and you're trying to do that, but maybe will get annoying after a while. So for me, I like it enough to want to spend a little bit of time here while I'm still in that period of my life. And I like that like people are just not really taking like people are just really not taking life too seriously down here, I feel like overall.
you definitely have an advantage being young in Buenos Aires to be able to keep up with the nightlife and having dinner at like midnight and going out at 2 a.m. till 7 a.m. or whatever it is.
For sure. Yeah. I think so. And I mean, I think, yeah, like I will not recommend Buenos Aires to everyone. I don't think it is for everyone. Like I think it's very easy to love Mexico. I would say this. I wouldn't say the same about like Argentina. Um, Not to say like it's like don't come check it out, but I think that that's probably a pretty like accurate thing to say. And then yeah, I just think that they do things their way.
Do you find it pretty safe?
Extremely safe. I would say it's the safest place that I've been in Latin America. Like I can walk around no problem at like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning, like after a night out, cell phone out, like probably risky behavior, but like it's very, very safe. If you stay, I should rephrase, if you're in Capital Federal, like the actual main part of Buenos Aires, very, very safe. I think it changes once you get out in like the provincia areas, but yes, overall very safe.
Have you done some exploring in other parts of Argentina?
I went to the south. So I went to like El Chalten and did like the Fitzroy hike. Been to Perito Moreno, which is like the glacier walk. That was an unreal trip. I love that. I'm planning to go in November to Mendoza, like the wine area, and do some like hiking out there. And then I'd also like to go to Bariloche, probably in like December or January. So those are kind of like the two immediate trips. I'd love to get down to Ushuaia. I want to go to the north of Argentina as well.
Have you got any intel about like how much it would cost to do the South Pole trip?
My dad like jokingly told me that he's going to come down here and we should do it together. He's no way he's going to do it, but I think it's pretty expensive. I think it's a few $1,000s for sure. Maybe if memory serves, like $5,000 to $10,000 to do it.
Yeah. I had the number 5,000 in my head.
Yeah, it's not cheap, and it's also like long. I think it's like 2 weeks to do it.
So when you're spending like, 6, 9 months in Argentina at a time, it's probably hard to bring that much cash, that much USD down with you, right? Because we always recommend people to bring USD cash to Argentina, exchange money at the blue rate, and then they get the better rate. But when you're going for such a long time, what do you do when your money runs out, or maybe it doesn't because you bring like 15, 20 grand down there or something? How do you do it for long-term stays?
Excellent question. So I think if you're coming for like 3-ish months, you could probably just bring, however, 5, 6, 7, $8,000 cash. Like if you want to do that, I'd say like it can't hurt to have a couple $1,000s of USD at all times on you in Argentina. I don't think it can be a bad thing because it's generally accepted and you can exchange it. There's a bunch of like, they're called cuevas, and you can exchange at the blue. Like if you're bringing a foreign currency in, you can exchange at the blue dollar rate. So that's pretty easy to do. Like you can generally like do it on like PayPal. They'll charge a fee, give you the blue rate. You can do it on like if you're into crypto, you can exchange like stables pretty easily. You can also there's like a bunch of like transfer apps. Like there's like Western Union. Most people just do like Western Union, or they will use like Zoom or MoneyGram or a couple of other. So you can just basically like wire yourself cash.
Yeah, and I heard Western Union actually is closer to the blue rate.
It's actually it's usually above the blue rate. So it's like a really good option. The issue with it is they charge a very hefty fee. So like let's say you're gonna take out $1,000 USD or something like that, they'll end up charging you for most people. This is speaking from like the perspective of Americans. I don't know if it's different for other countries, but they'll charge you like, I don't know, 50, $60 to do that. So yes, like you're getting a slightly better rate than the blue, but the fee kind of eats into that. And they used to give like a bunch of codes, but since I've been back here, they have not been. So Um, you just kind of have to like play around with it, and whatever day you're going to try and get cash, there's like a bunch of ways to do it. So like if you're not going to bring cash, not the end of the world. There's ways
What,
to
yeah,
get it.
what are these alternatives again? So you have the traditional platforms, Western Union, MoneyGram. You have crypto with stable coins, which sounds a little complicated for people who aren't into that. What else can people do?
You could go like there's like a ton of contacts in like expat groups and forums and stuff. So like you can find guys who like have a business, and you can basically, I mean, it's essentially a business. You can like go to their like office. You could basically like I've talked to dudes over like Facebook Messenger for sure and been like, hey, I'm looking to come pick up whatever, like 500 US dollars, or I want to exchange the equivalent into pesos. Can you do that for me? And then from there, you can just basically like either, yeah, like PayPal. Some of them will accept like Venmo, or what's the other one that like
Right. Okay. So you're gonna send them money like in the States, basically,
they'll have
and then,
they'll have like a US bank account usually. So
yeah, yeah,
you can virtually just send it to them, or and then they'll give
from
you like
your Wells
cash.
Fargo, from your Chase account, whatever, and then you
Exactly.
just their
Yeah.
account, and then they'll just give you cash.
Yeah, there's a ton of options. But I mostly will, yeah, I'll just like usually like if I'm looking to take out cash, I'll kind of like see what that day is like giving me the best rate and go with that one. It's pretty annoying, I'm not gonna lie. It's like, yes, you get to take advantage of like living in a, I guess, a cheaper part of the world, but it's like not, it has downsides too. Like you have to like figure out how to get the money, and
Yeah.
it's, you have to bring a bunch of money around all the time, pay in a bunch of bills. Like, yeah, living under hyperinflation is interesting.
And so do you like I know there's like an app or a website where you can basically check what rate the different exchange houses are posting, like local in Buenos Aires, and so that you know which exchange house to go and exchange your USD at. Do you do that?
I usually I'll check like the three options that I use, which is like I use like this one, I guess like I have like a contact, like a money exchange dude. I'll use him. I'll check like Western Union. I'll check. I just got turned on to this one called like MoneyGram, so I've been checking that too. But those are kind of like
Mhm.
the three options that I've mainly been looking at, and then I'll just like, yeah, pick the best one.
So is that kind of like a lot of the chatter between expats and digital nomad is just like trading contacts for money changers and stuff?
That's definitely some chatter, yeah. And people will like bring in like, so if you do have dollars, you can just go like, I mean, there's for sure a bunch of groups where it's like, hey, just arrived here. I have $700. Does anyone want to give me some pesos for it, or vice versa? Like that's going on a ton too, just like direct exchanges like that.
Yeah, you
Um,
got to be careful.
yeah, for sure. Or like there's a main street in Buenos Aires called Florida, and you can go
Mhm.
down there and exchange cash with like the guys that are like, hey, like, do you want money? You want money?
Mhm. And in your experience, do they accept $100 bills or do they prefer smaller bills?
This is so Argentinian. So they prefer crisp $100 bills, and they want the I forget if it's
Blue
Cara Grande or Cara Chicos. The newer ones will sometimes, like the ones with like the blue mark on it, the blue
Yeah,
watermark on
blue
it.
strips, blue bills. They want that or they don't want
They
that?
want those. So if you
Yeah.
have the newer version, you will sometimes get even
Get
a
a better
better rate
rate.
for it. So Argentinian.
Right.
I read
Versus the
something
green.
today that said that Argentina has 1 out of 5 physical US dollars in total circulation inside the country.
And will they take the 20s, 10s, 5s or not even?
They will.
Is
They
that a
will. Yeah,
discounted
they
rate
will.
or?
Yeah, they will. And even like if you're in like I've seen this happen. Like I've had a friend that just got off the plane and he like had some dollars, and we like went out to like a bar or something, And he had like a $20 bill or like $100 bill, and he's like, "Hey guys, I have this. Can I pay this?" And they like will look up the blue rate on the spot, and then like take the $100 bill and give him the change in pesos at the blue rate.
In the Blu-ray. That's
Yep,
pretty dope.
yep.
Speaking of bars, I mean, so how much is a cocktail these days if you put it back to US dollar equivalent? So Aperol Spritz, decently fancy patio or rooftop. How much is that Aperol going to
Yeah,
cost?
yeah. So I think a lot of people think Buenos Aires is like extremely cheap. Like you can just, come here and just do whatever. And it definitely is very, very cheap. Particularly drinking is very cheap. Like if you're going to go like what's the cheapest thing in like the main spending categories, like drinking is super cheap. So a fancy cocktail might be like in like a top tier spot, like the top tier cocktail is going to be like, yeah, like $3 to $5 probably. So drinking, if you want like a bottle at like a, like let's say like a bottle of normal vodka at like a club between like $30 and $50. Like it's very, very affordable to drink and party and go out. Like transportation is very affordable. So like taxis are cheap. Um, Food can be both ways. Like it's like random pricing. I find like it's like you can get very, very cheap, affordable, like $3, $5 typical like menu del dias, and then you can go spend. I guess it's not that expensive, but like you can definitely drop like 20, $25 on like a spot that you would think would be like probably like $10, and you'd be like, whoa, like this was way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. So that can happen, but generally it's like pretty affordable. What's going to like really, really eat your budget though is like that, like we were talking about, man. Airbnb here is just out of control expensive. Like it's insane. Like we're talking like $1,500 studios. Like it's like really, really bad.
Doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
That's weird. I remember seeing mad stuff for like 400 or 500 bucks.
When were you looking? Because it used to be cheap. Like when I came here in 2019, 2020, it was very, very cheap. Like you could find really good housing options for, yeah, like 500, 600, $700 a month. But like now it's just like, I don't know, especially if you're coming for high season, which is like their summer,
Hmm.
it can get pretty expensive if you're not booking like well in advance.
Damn, I had no idea. Yeah, I remember being in Buenos Aires and being like, "This Aperol is $2.50. This is insane." Yeah.
But drinking, yeah, drinking is really, really cheap here for sure.
Like like fancy cocktails, where like they get the cinnamon and like they set it on fire and all the rest of it, and I'm like, this is $3.
Yeah, it's for sure a good bargain if you like to drink.